I think the real origin of the major issues we're experiencing today, the primary cause of it is the downzonings that took place from the 1960s to the 1980s. This graph shows the capacity of the city, and that very much tells the story right here. We used to have zoning to allow for a lot of housing. You could generally build multifamily housing in most of the city, and then we stopped allowing it. You can see this reflected very well in the number of homes that have gotten built each decade. Except for during World War II, it's gone down every subsequent decade as we've used up that capacity of what it got down to. Then you notice this bar on the right. What is that? That is regional housing needs assessment. Every 8 years, the state assigns to each region a housing target that needs to be built by that region. Then all the cities and counties in that region get together and allocate those targets among the different jurisdictions. For this last cycle, which started in 2021, the numbers of required homes to accommodate for much higher. The county of Los Angeles, including the city of Los Angeles, got the bulk of the homes required in the region, and then the city of Los Angeles got the bulk, but half of the homes that need to be built in the county of Los Angeles. Once these numbers are doled out to each city, then the cities need to put together a plan for how they're going to accommodate that. And one of the first steps is looking at the current zoning and current land use regulations and saying, how many homes can we accommodate? This is easier said than done, and I'm going to use this as an example to show some of the complexity here. You have these two lots that both have the same zoning and they're the same size lots, so they both have a zone capacity once you add bonuses in of 23 units. What would you say is the remaining usable, realistic development capacity of these two? One more simple strategy that a lot of cities utilize is just subtracting the second number from the first number. But you look at the lot on the left, that has a building there with 14 units. You'd be crazy to knock that down to build a 23-unit building, right? You would lose a massive amount of money. Whereas the lot on the right, it's only a 4-unit building, that might potentially could make economic sense to knock down building, and there's also a big empty portion of the back. You could potentially add a second building there. So if I was doing this analysis, just looking at these two lots to do more complex analysis than that, I'd say the green lot has basically a realistic capacity under the zoning of 0, and then the blue lot would be, you just subtract the 4 from the 23. In reality, what the city did, they couldn't decide between working with USC and UCLA, so they went with Berkeley. They developed a very complicated methodology and a regression model that looked at the realistic development capacity, looked at a whole bunch of different factors, and these are the actual numbers they came up with for these sites. Regression models are very confusing. It incorporates the statistical probability of each site being developed, which is why it's weird. So the green one got 0.11 and the blue one got 0.59. When this method was applied to all of the parcels on the city, it found that we have a shortfall of about 255,000 units, that we don't have the zoning to accommodate those units. The state's housing law requires us then to put together a plan to rezone for all this. The city put a lot of effort into this, came out with a whole bunch of different strategies, and if all these strategies were implemented how they said in the plan, it would lead to a grand total zoning to accommodate an additional over the current zoning of 1.4 million units. Of course, we know from looking at all y'all, this isn't actually going to lead to 1.4 million units being built. This, probably maybe 1, 2, 3% of that would actually get built, but that would be enough to accommodate our housing needs. However, there is starting to be a lot of opposition to this rezoning now that we're actually getting to the point where we're about a year and a half away from actually paying attention to this. What I'm worried about, and I think a lot of people are worried about, is that there's going to be a lot of pressure from anti-housing activists to only hit the minimum number. So we have a shortfall of 255,000 units. Say, let's only zone for capacity of 255 additional units. We know that that is setting ourselves up for failure, right? We know that we're not going to get 100% of the capacity developed. We don't necessarily need to zone for 1.4 million new units. I think there's a reasonable argument to say that a lower number is sufficient, but we know that just the minimum number is not going to actually do really much of anything. There are serious consequences if we don't take this process seriously and we don't rezone to accommodate the housing that we need. One of the big ones is loss of affordable housing funding. Now, that might not be something that some of these NIMBYs actually care about, even though they say they care about it, but they probably do care about housing element being decertified, which would subject us to builder's remedy, which basically means that any development with at least 20% affordable in any place in the city, so any single-family neighborhood, you could build a 50-foot tall tower, and there's nothing the city can do to stop it, and that could happen if a housing element is decertified. I have joked around in the past with some city officials like, I should threaten to sue the city to decertify the housing element so they take this more seriously. I wasn't actually going to do that. I recently found out there's a group that has been raising money with the anticipation that we're going to mess this up, and then they're going to sue the city to try and decertify the housing element. So this is actually a serious thing we might be facing. And as fun as that chaos might be, and in a fantasy land, if you're really pro-housing, pro-development, that might be great. Let's not get to that point, right? Let's put together a plan, get rezoning done to accommodate the housing we need, rather than leaving it up to the courts and having yields of lawsuits and costing the city millions of dollars to have this free for all.